Welcome. I'm Sherry Damaris, and today I have with me Steve Acuff from Stockholm, Sweden. So Steve is the author of Eating the Wu Way. He's a longtime macrobiotic counselor, and today we're going to talk a little bit about cancer and some of the foods that help sometimes heal cancer and turn things around. So I'm so excited to have you on, Steve. I know you have a huge following in Europe and America. Sometimes we call them Steve Acuff groupies that follow you around because they love your teaching so much. So thank you so much for coming on the show today. Do you want to explain to people what the title of your book means, Eating the Wu Way?
Yes, well, thank you for the invitation. Wu Wei is an expression from Taoism, the philosophy of polarity from the Far East. And it basically tells us we should live in harmony with the natural world and order around us rather than fighting it and opposing it. So Wu Wei basically means not doing. So in other words, don't do anything extra that will bring you in conflict with the natural order. Just go with the flow. So I chose that as the title of the book, and of course it's a play on words because when we write Chinese with our Western letters, we write it W-E-I for way, following international phonetics, and here I've written in the normal English way, the Wu Way. It's about my experience with many years of macrobiotic personal life and my counseling, as well as a lot of recipes. So, it's very popular for the recipes because if you can't make that work, doesn't matter what you tell people, they just are not interested in something that doesn't satisfy their need for taste enjoyment.
And you've been on the show before, and we've also hosted some Thursday night lectures, and you've talked about the immune system and how important it is to keep it strong during the pandemic and COVID. Today we thought we'd talk a little bit about cancer because you have so many clients that come see you either on Zoom or in person who have cancer, and they're turning it around simply by changing the foods they eat. So do you want to explain a little bit about what kind of advice you give to these people and maybe some of the cancers that you see that improve more dramatically with the diet as opposed to others?
Yes, I worked for several years with Michio Kushi, a well-known teacher of macrobiotics, and he was very kind in tutoring me in this job because I was chosen to start a macrobiotic food program in a clinic in Kassel, Germany. And the clinic was mainly oncology, in other words, cancer medicine. And I learned the details, the way Michio would work with advising food to improve the immune system and other things that go along with the food. And we began that on January 1st, 1988, and I did that for 6 years before moving on, and saw hundreds of cancer patients at that time. We would have a program of about 60 patients, so that were 1/3 of the total patients. They could choose. Our program were just conventional food. And so I had a lot of experience with people getting the easy way, let's say, because they only had to come to the dining hall 3 times a day. They didn't have to go home and work with, new recipes, new foods. So the situation was very good, and we saw great success. The problem, of course, is most patients only stayed for 6 weeks, so you couldn't stay with them as long as is necessary because you don't turn cancer around in 6 weeks, but you certainly can make an impression. So we had patients coming and going, and I would see some of these patients when I would travel around Germany after their time at the clinic, because I did a lot of public speaking from, Hamburg in the north down to the Bavarian Alps. And I would meet these people. Sometimes they would come to my lectures, and it was always fun to see people who were living far beyond what was expected. Because even medical doctors, oncologists know that there are limits to what they can do. And I remember one situation particularly when I was in Hanover, which is in northern Germany, and a man named Schultz came to my lecture, and 2 years before he had been in the clinic with advanced pancreatic cancer that had spread through his whole belly area, basically, a hopeless situation. And so he came to my lecture, and then after the lecture, he came up to me and said, well, when you go back to the clinic, say hello to the head oncologist. So I said, okay, I will do that. So I came back to the clinic, I saw the head oncologist, and I said, oh, by the way, greetings from Schultz in Hanover. And he got big eyes and said, Schultz is alive? You couldn't believe it. Someone who works with this all the time knows that advanced pancreatic cancer just is an incurable disease, and you have to do something very special to beat it. So, what did we do? Well, we basically do wu wei. We try to stay out of the way and let the body solve its own problems. The body is a self-healing machine, and if left to its own resources, can do a lot. However, because of the damage that we do to the body over years of, mistreating it, wrong foods and unhealthy lifestyle, it takes some very special things to get the body really into that mode again. And of course, we all should feel, let's say, touched by this subject, aside from knowing people who have had the cancer, and most of them die of it. We know that every one of us has cancer cells in his or her body. Just living in the modern society, coming in contact with carcinogenic substance every day, means that we need to have a really good functioning immune system, because if everybody has cancer cells, but only some of us get cancer, then obviously we want to do what we can do to prevent it happening. The statistics now for the U.S., which is a leading cancer nation, is about 1 out of 3 women and 1 out of 2 men. Exactly 47% of men will get cancer in the course of their lives. So this is a lot of people, and it just keeps creeping up. So what do? We help them by showing foods that, first of all, help detox. If you're going to beat cancer, there are 2 basic things to think about. One is, how can you get toxins out of the body? We live in a very toxic world. We all know that. We just read about that every day, or we experience it. But also the endotoxins, the things that we create just by living and firing the ATP, the source of our fuel to live, all body functions. We create a kind of exhaust, we could say, toxic byproducts of the burning, and they have to get out. And if you don't get rid of them, then you start getting cell changes, and that we would think about as a cancer development. And the other thing is, we have to have the right nutrients so the body functions properly. Now, the greatest myth is that cancer is genetic. I hear it all the time, and medical doctors, unfortunately, perpetuate this myth by asking people, what did your grandparents die of? And it really doesn't matter. We know today that epigenetics is much more important. In other words, how food and environmental impulses will trigger our genes to do this or that, and that there's not just a genetic, fate of getting breast cancer or anything else. It just gives a sense of hopelessness if you think you've got the wrong genes. So we just help people then to get their bodies going the way they should, and to understand that they can do this. It's an empowerment. So that's what we did. And macrobiotic food is ideal for this, because all illness is basically inflammation, and cancer also develops out of inflammation. So the foods that stop inflammation are logically the ones that will stop cancer. And I've seen people do it. Medical sensations. In fact, twice in my career, I've had oncologists, in other words, medical specialists for cancer, come to me for personal counseling about a loved one in their family who has cancer. And why would a cancer specialist who's had all these years of training and experience come to talk to someone who has no medical experience about a loved one? The answer is clear. They see daily the limits of their own treatments. They're not promising people they're going to cure them. They're speaking about, kind of lengthening life and, trying to hold it back. But a real cancer cure doesn't exist. So, and they know this. And then they see patients who have gone this way of using healthy food, whole organic foods in the proper proportions to turn it around. And when their patients do that, they obviously think, well, my brother's got cancer now. I would want to pass this on to him too. Mm-hmm. So that's, really where it goes. And macrobiotics is especially good because I think it's the ideal food for cancer recovery because it's very anti-inflammatory. It's even things like the nightshades. Very few people think about nightshades, which are potatoes, tomatoes, bell peppers, eggplants, chili, and tobacco. Very few people think about these as being any problem. In fact, they look at me like I've lost my mind if I tell them they shouldn't eat them. However, nightshades are a real problem for inflammation. They trigger inflammation, and we recommend people to take those out of their daily food program. So these are kind of special things we take besides the normal things that you don't eat sugar, which is a cancer trigger. Don't eat bad fats, these highly processed, refined oils that are in all the food today, the omega-6 fatty acids that cause the inflammation. And of course, we deal with the energetics of food, as macrobiotics is known as the yin and the yang, this oriental understanding of balance. That's the Taoist part. And so we work with the energetics of food, like is it more heating or more cooling? Many people have too much cold in their bodies, why the cancer comes about. They need to get their proper heat in the body going. So we work at different levels. And I'm very happy that my life's path has been with this because I just get lots of good reports back. In fact, just today I got an email from a man in Australia thanking me for helping him several years ago to overcome a serious health problem. And now he's got a different health problem because as happens in life, people tend to veer away from the good stuff after the recovery, because we live in a society that goes in a different way. And it's very easy to end up getting pulled back into the daily habits that are, very, harmful to our health.
Steve, I find every word fascinating of what you're talking about, and I encourage viewers to pick up a copy of Colin Campbell's book, The China Study, to read more about epigenetics, where he scientifically proved that yes, cancer can develop not from your genes or actually affect your genes, that food actually affects the whole DNA and RNA process. We're going to take a commercial break, and when we come back, we want to hear more about your work specifically with cancer patients and how you're turning them around.
So, I'm kind of new here, but I've noticed a trend. My human does this funny thing where she goes around and gets all my toys, and then she hides them in that basket by the door. But it's always the same basket, and it's always in the same place. And then she acts so surprised when I find them, but, she's putting them in the same basket. again. It's like, hello, that's where you put it last time. You were the worst at hide and go seek.
Hi, welcome back. I'm Sherry Damaris with Macro Magic, and we're talking to Steve Acuff from Sweden. And we've been talking about cancer and the myth that sometimes it's inherited, when really epigenetics is now coming out with new scientific findings that even changing your diet can affect your DNA. So we're with Steve, and Steve, tell us a little bit more about the patients you've been seeing. Have you seen, you mentioned pancreatic cancer, have you seen any other cancers improve, or people with these cancers improve their health and maybe reduce tumors? I've seen a lot of tumors shrink throughout, teaching cooking to many, many people across the world. I've seen tumors shrink, and I've seen, PET scans and CAT scans come back, pretty clear after a year, 2 years of eating a more clean diet.
Yes, we had a good situation in the clinic because we could actually follow up on the patients with medical diagnoses. There's a special blood test called the spectrometric whole blood test that began in Germany, but now they've got it in the US too, in Chicago. They have a lab, spectrometric whole blood test at doctor's data. And when you look at the patient's blood test, you'll find on a normal serum test that most cancer patients have quite normal blood. In fact, you wonder why they even do a blood test, because everything seems to be normal. When you do a spectrometric test, you get a much deeper look into the blood, and then with cancer patients, nothing is normal, or a lot is not normal, let's say. So with our patients, we would not only work with the food, which is the very basis, but also with some supplements. So it was a combination, because if you have, like, say, allergies and you want to improve yourself, then you could really do it pretty much with food. Supplements can always help somewhere, but there's not as much a need for them. With cancer, the patients have a lack of time. This is a thing that will cost them their lives if they don't turn it around quickly. So you just get more intensely involved. So we would be working with supplements there as well as the food, and also food specifically. Now, no matter what cancer someone has, certain things should never be eaten. I mentioned, of course, sugar, but dairy food, milk products have to be out. Now, especially because of the estrogen, a pregnant cow, which is where you're getting the milk from, is going to be loaded with estrogen. And so any milk is going to have that. And breast cancer is the most common cancer among women in Europe and also the US. It's the number one cause of death of middle-aged women. So we see that the results with the oncology department are not that great. And so I saw a lot of that. In fact, I would say that was the number one problem that I saw. Then a lot of prostate cancer, because also there, estrogen can also play a role, but there are other things going on with prostate cancer. It is the number one cancer among men. And the number two cancer is bowel cancer or colon cancer. So these are also the ones that I saw the most of. And they're called epithelial cancers. Technically, and there's this tumor mass growing inside the body, and you have to stop that. So with the food, you first of all you've got to get through the food a different hormonal balance, because like the kind of food you eat will determine the hormones, of course. And then there's also the insulin factor. There's insulin, the IGF-1, insulin growth factor 1, will promote cancer cell growth. It's a growth factor. And milk is loaded with this stuff because it's meant to help the calf grow. So we get them all off of that kind of stuff. And then we give them the food they need, which, as I mentioned in a previous interview, eating seaweed, which contains iodine, is very important, because iodine is a very strong anti-cancer as well as antiviral, antibacterial substance. And most people lack iodine. In fact, if you don't eat seaweed, you probably have a deficiency. So we would have these, especially breast cancer, prostate cancer, very closely related to iodine deficiencies, estrogen problems, hormonal problems, and with the food, just getting their bodies into a hormonal state that's conducive to healing. And then, of course, thinking about bowel cancer, colon cancer, which is very common, and obviously the food you eat will have a lot of impact on what happens in the gut. So you eat certain kind of foods and you're going to get a certain kind of gut bacteria, and this will promote the growth of cancer cells or prevent it. And we all know, if anyone who takes a little time to study the information knows, that fiber-rich foods are what the beneficial bacteria need and want, and that means we have to eat plant food. And animal food has to be a very, very small secondary part of the food program. A little change of pace if you desire it, but it has to be based on plants. And that's what we do no matter what kind of cancer it is, because cancer is basically a term that covers over 100 different kinds of illnesses. Like, what does breast cancer have in common with leukemia? It doesn't seem to have a lot, but there are certain common factors, but they are very different kind of illnesses. So we have to get back into balance and then let the body take care of that. So I remember one of probably the most interesting case I ever experienced was a man named Peter in Berlin. And I was in Kassel at the time, which was about maybe a 3-hour drive away. And a friend of mine drove this man from Berlin over to Kassel to talk to me. He had lung cancer in his right lung that had gone into his liver and his brain. So they took out his right lung, discovered the metastases, in other words, the spreading cancer in both his liver and his brain, and told him he had 3 months to live, no treatment, just give him some painkillers so he could get through his last couple of months. This was in 1986. And I remember because Chernobyl had just happened, and I was wondering how radioactive the garden was where we were sitting outside. And this man went back to Berlin, and his wife, who was very devoted, she cooked 3 meals a day for him. There were no leftovers. Most of us eat leftovers. It's just too much cooking. But his wife cooked 3 meals a day for him. He ate them very well. I told him his first goal was to stop the painkillers. And he got there in about 2 weeks. And then within 18 months, there was no trace of cancer left in his body. It was all gone. The metastases in his brain and his liver were gone. He died 23 years later, instead of 3 months later. 23 years later, we're all going to die at some point. And what did he do? Well, he ate the food that his body needed to heal, but above all, he had someone who was supporting him and cooking for him. I have found that men generally are not interested in the kitchen, and even if their life depends on it, they're really dependent on a woman to take over for them. And she was very devoted. So that was a great story.
Stephen.
Also, a very interesting one was a man in Kassel, and he was from Kassel. So after he was in the clinic, he would drop by sometimes. So I was able to see him. And he had prostate cancer that had gone into the bones, which is the most common place it goes. So again, he had the great advantage of starting in the clinic, so he was able to get all the food right, staying there for 6 weeks. He knew how to do it when he went home, and his wife also very supportive. And this was back in the 80s, and at that time they would operate away the testicles on prostate cancer men, trying to lower the male hormone levels, and that certainly will do it. They do it with estrogen injections now, but this was in the old days. And so then they came for just a little chat with me, the two of them, and he told me that now these metastases that showed up as little spots in his bones, that they were becoming fuzzier every time they did an x-ray. Fuzzier and fuzzier mean they were no longer clearly defined. And he was out bicycling and up through the hills and just having a great time. And it was quite interesting because he said that now without testicles, he was supposed to not be able to have any more sex with his wife. And he said, but since he ate this food, he discovered that he was able to, and he said the doctor said that's impossible. Now, I don't know why the doctor would say that, because it's well known that the adrenal glands can take over for the testicles, as a backup. But his wife then says, it's true, I was there. So, you see things like just amazing healing successes. And unfortunately, medical doctors don't follow up on that. They should say, this is an amazing healing thing. Why don't you tell me what you did, and maybe I can help other people with this. But they've got their program they've learned, and they're not really interested in hearing something else because, it might confuse them. So they usually just say, well, that's good for you. Great. I'm glad it worked for you. But they're thinking, well, we just continue with our program here because, of course, the doctor would get into trouble if he went out and started giving people food advice when they've got cancer.
Right.
So, my personal experience has shown this really works. And sometimes it doesn't work. It doesn't work every time. Some people are so damaged by chemotherapy, radiation treatments that the body is just taken such a beating, it doesn't regenerate. So, my purpose is always to motivate people to get into it. And I do that by showing them the program that will help, because if they start feeling an improvement, like this man, when he saw that the spots were becoming less in his bones, because that's what kills, the prostate cancer doesn't kill, it's when it goes into the bones, he got really fired up and motivated to do this, to keep doing it. Because if you're going to beat cancer, you have to have an enthusiasm, really a fire in your gut to just keep going and not stop after a few weeks. This goes month after month, because this is a long-term marathon.
Absolutely.
And so the improvements do that.
That's a beautiful story, Steve. We're going to have to wrap up, but before we do, can you share with the audience how people can reach you, order your book, maybe get in touch with and sign up for a session with you? I know you do a lot of work on Zoom.
Yes, people can contact me through my website, stephenacuff.org, and there's a way to contact me over email then. And if you're interested in the book, you can contact me, let me know that you'd like to have the book. I'm shipwrecked in Sweden at the moment. I usually get back over to the States more often, but not happening. So I have friends who will take care to be sure you can get the book if you're interested in it.
Great. And thank you so much, Steve. We're really inspired by your stories. I don't know if you know, here in Philadelphia, Dr. Anthony Sadalero wrote a best-selling book called Recalled by Life, and he had prostate cancer that traveled up to his brain and came back with clear scans after 6 months of starting a macrobiotic diet. So that's how it all started in Philadelphia. So it's really wonderful to hear your work with these same patients over in Europe. And I hope it continues. So many people, I think, just to feel better through treatments, through chemotherapy and radiation treatments. I think it's important to learn about the body and what it needs nutritional wise. So thank you so much for being on the show. We so appreciate your work, and we hope to have you on periodically to give us updates on what you're doing with your patients.
Thank you very much.
Yes, and everyone, make sure to grow a garden and eat healthy, and tune in next time for another episode of Macro Magic.